Chapter 7. They rushed into the night forest, following the tracks of the sleds that had gone ahead of them, weaving between the tall, dark trees. Far ahead, they could sometimes hear the deep barking of other sled teams, and the pugs lifted up their little heads and answered, "Yip, yip, yip." They were loving it. They felt like real dogs at last, the sort of dogs that they were in their secret doggy dreams. But all that woofing and yipping made the dark trees tremble, and down the branches slid great dollops of snow. Whoops. Flump, flump, flump. Somehow, Sika steered her way around them without crashing into any tree trunks. Other sleds were not so fortunate. They passed two which had been smashed by the snow flumps and whose grumpy owners were starting the long walk back to Snowdovia. And near the far edge of the forest they found Shackleton Jones, standing under the trees, watching while Snowbot dug his high-tech sled and robot dog team out of a massive snow dollop. Sika slowed her sled to ask if he needed help, but he just grinned and said, "I have all the help I need. Snowbot is designed to dig a ton of snow per minute. You'll soon have us out of here, won't you, Snowbot?" He beamed at the children again. "So, kids, next stop, Kraken's Den, eh? What's supposed to go on there, do you think?" "They say the Kraken sleeps there," said Sika. "It's an ancient sea monster with tentacles and things. When true winter comes, it rises to the surface. If we're lucky, the ice will be thick enough to stop it reaching up and grabbing us." Shackleton Jones laughed. "The Kraken? You don't believe in that old story, do you? It's just a legend of the sea, like the Bermuda Triangle or the Night of the Seawigs." "Idiot," muttered Sika as they went on. "He'll be saying next that Snowfather himself is just a legend." At least not the last anymore," said Shen, looking back over his shoulder as they left the snow-flumped sled behind. But secretly, he was hoping that Shackleton Jones had been right about the Kraken. They shot out of the forest and went swooshing down a long, smooth slope. They left the land and went speeding over the sea. The ice was smoother here. It was sheltered by high, dark rocks, which poked from the frozen sea in a wide ring. There's the picture. It was as smooth as a skating rink, and all over its surface, Shen could see the tracks of the other sleds which had come this way, heading towards the north. "What a strange place," he said. "I wonder if the Kraken really does live here." He looked down. The frozen sea was as clear as glass, thick and ripply like the glass in front doors. He looked down through it, and from the cold depths something looked up at him. The sled was hurtling above an eye the size of a car park. And all those snaky rocks weren't rocks at all. They were the tips of massive tentacles, frozen as the Kraken lifted them up out of the sea. Sika," said Shen. That's the Pugs, that's Sika and Shen, and what do you think that is? Yep, an eyeball. "What is it?" Shen looked down at the eye again. He wasn't sure that he was sure that it was staring right at him, and then, as he stared back at it, it blinked. Crack! Crash! The towering tentacles twitched. Cascades of shattering ice came raining down their sides like broken glass as the tips waved, trying to break free and snatch at Shen and Sika. Cracks spread across the ice. "Go faster!" shouted Shen. But the 66 pugs were already running as fast as they could. Their little pink tongues were hanging out and their hot breath made plumes of steamy plumes of steam in the icy air. Their paws skittered on the frozen sea. A crack went zigzagging across the ice in front of them, and they jumped it, the sled bumping behind them. Then another. The pugs veered away as the crack widened, but now more cracks were opening all around. The ice of Kraken's Deep jumped like drumskin as the huge beast beneath it lurched upwards, and all the tentacles writhed and strained. The pugs stopped running. There was nowhere to run to. The sled was on an icy island, surrounded by widening cracks. The island began to tilt, and the sled slithered backwards. Quickly, Shen leaned over the front of the sled and began unclipping the pug's leads. If it slid right over the edge of the ice and down into the dark water, he did not want it to drag all the poor pugs with it. With a terrible splintering noise, one of the Kraken's tentacles tore free of the ice and came groping towards the stranded sled, showering Shen and Seeker with cold salt water and shards of ice which smashed all around them like dropping window panes. The Kraken's huge eye watched coldly from below. It had been asleep for a long time, ever since the last true winter, in fact. The runners of all the other sleds had woken it as they went screaming across the ice. Now it was looking for breakfast. But the pugs were not having any of that. They began to yip and yap even louder than before. They bounced about on their short legs, barking and snarling at the huge purple tentacle as it curled above them. One, braver than the rest, bounced so high that he managed to sink his teeth into the tip of it. It startled Kraken, lashing its tentacle about. The startled Kraken lashed its tentacle about, but the pug clung on tight. All the other pugs thought that looked such fun that they went charging off to find tentacles of their own to attack. Without the heavy sled to pull, they jumped easily over the cracks the Kraken had opened. So this is a tentacle, there's a pug biting it. Yipping fiercely, they flung themselves at the twining tentacles and bit them hard. The Kraken thrashed about, trying to shake them off, but they just wagged their tails and snarled. The huge creature stared up through the ice in confusion. It had fought battles with killer whales in the dark blue depths and dragged polar bears down into its chilly lair, but it had never met creatures like these before. Little specks like flakes of wind-blown fluff, but fluff with teeth. Ow, thought the Kraken, and one by one it snaked its tentacles back down into the deep. The pugs let go as the tentacle tips vanished back beneath the ice, but they kept barking and snarling and yipping. Shen and Seeker stared down through the ice. The great eye of the Kraken stared angrily back for a moment. Then it vanished, as the Kraken squirted out a huge black cloud of ink to hide itself. When the ink cleared, the Kraken was gone. It had swum away to find a less dangerous breakfast, maybe a shark or two out in the deep ocean. In the holes and cracks which it had made, the water was already freezing again. "Phew," said Shen, and started gathering the pugs together again. "Wait until I tell Grandpa," said Seeker. That was as good as any of his stories. For the first time, Shen felt that there was a chance they might win. Then, while they were busy reattaching the pugs to the sled, they heard the barking of another dog team behind them. Shackleton, Jones and Snowbot had got their sled working again, and they came swooping across Kraken's Deep, waving as they zipped past Shen and Seeker. "See?" shouted Shackleton Jones. "There's no Kraken here. It's all just a silly superstition." But, Shen started to say, it was no use. Already Shackleton Jones and his sled were just a dot dwindling into the north. "Great," said Seeker. "Now we're last again." "But we have the bravest dog team," said Shen, scattering doggy treats for the pugs. And that's the end. Next chapter, chapter 8.